escaping the endless cycle of rebirth and death, a narrative of the soul's final turning. The night was unusually still, as though the world had paused its breath. Arun sat alone on the cracked stone step outside an abandoned mountain shrine, looking out over the dark valley. The moon hung like a pale witness above him. This was where he came whenever he felt the weight of human existence pressing too heavily. Whenever the world felt like a wheel turning endlessly, dragging him with it. He had always sensed it. This cycle, invisible yet merciless, in which lives repeat themselves like half-remembered dreams. Something in him knew he had lived before, that he carried old wounds from forgotten centuries, that familiar fears and compulsions were not accidents of psychology, but echoes of previous births. No matter what he obtained, relationships, comfort, knowledge, it faded like morning mist. Every gain dissolved. Every joy had a shadow. Every birth pointed secretly toward death. That night, he whispered into the cold air, "How does one escape this?" The question did not come from his mind. It came from his bones. The arrival of the stranger. Just as his whisper died, he heard footsteps behind him. Slow, deliberate. Arun turned. An old man approached, a wanderer draped in a simple gray cloth, eyes shining with a clarity that unsettled more than comforted. He did not introduce himself. He simply sat beside Arun, hands resting quietly in his lap. "You are tired," the stranger said. "Not in body, but in the deep way, the way of a soul who has died too many times without ever truly living." Arun felt seen in a way he never had before. "Do you know the way out?" Arun asked, desperate, embarrassed, but unable to restrain himself. The old man smiled faintly. "There is no way out for the person you think you are, but there is a way out for what you truly are." He picked up a small pebble and rolled it between his fingers. "You believe yourself to be like this stone, solid, separate, enduring. But you are more like the wind. You move. You change form. You return. You vanish. And the wind suffers only when it tries to be a stone." A silence settled between them. The wheel within. "Why do we return?" Arun finally asked. "Why do we keep coming back?" The stranger pointed to Arun's chest, not to his heart, but deeper. "You return because you believe in the dream of yourself. You return because you cling to everything that arises within you. Desire is a hook. Fear is a chain. Memory is a rope. And identity," he paused, "identity is the wheel itself." Arun felt something inside him shift, as though a secret mechanism had been exposed. The old man continued, "When you are born, you take form. When you die, you take another. The form changes. The clinging remains. What is reborn is not a soul, but a continuity of attachment." Arun swallowed. "Then how do I break it?" The old man looked at him with an expression both stern and compassionate. "By seeing clearly that there is nothing to cling to, not even the one who clings." The training begins. For the next 7 days, the stranger taught Arun in silence more often than with words. He didn't preach philosophy. He dismantled the illusions Arun had defended for a lifetime. 1. The lesson of desire. The stranger handed Arun a cup of fresh spring water. "Drink," he said. Arun drank. The water was clear, cold, perfect. "Now give it back." Arun hesitated. He wanted more. "There," the stranger said. "That is the seed of rebirth, this subtle twitch of wanting." "But wanting water is natural," Arun protested. "Yes, but watch how want becomes identity. First you want water, then you want comfort, then safety, then recognition, then permanence. In the end, you want the impossible to make the changing unchanging." Arun realized the stranger was not telling him to deny life, but to see where desire quietly crossed the boundary into bondage. 2. The lesson of fear. On the 4th night, the stranger asked Arun to sit alone deep in the woods. Not to meditate, not to chant, not to protect himself with rituals, simply to sit. The forest was pitch black. Every sound felt like a threat. Something in Arun's mind screamed run. He stayed. When he returned, trembling but unharmed, the stranger asked, "What did you discover?" "That fear is a liar," Arun whispered. "It promises danger even when there is none." The stranger nodded. "Fear ties you to the body. The body ties you to the cycle. You return because you fear losing what was never yours." 3. The lesson of identity. On the final day, the stranger drew a circle in the dirt. "This is Samsara, the wheel of birth and death. The ego sits here." He tapped the edge of the circle, forever running around it. He erased the circle with his foot. Enlightenment does not happen when the ego escapes the wheel. Enlightenment happens when you see there never was a wheel. Arun felt a sudden clarity, like a storm breaking. But it lasted only a moment. The final gate. That evening, the stranger told Arun, "Tonight you will cross the gate, or you will remain as you have always been." Arun felt both terror and anticipation. "What must I do?" "Nothing," the stranger said. "That is the gate." Arun sat. He closed his eyes. For hours, his mind replayed memories, failures, fears, dreams, ambitions, relationships, identities. He felt the entire accumulation of countless lifetimes rising and falling like waves. He wanted to push them away. The stranger said, "Let them pass." He wanted to understand them. The stranger said, "Let them pass." He wanted to hold on to the peace that sometimes flickered between thoughts. The stranger said, "Let even that pass." Finally, there was nothing left to cling to, not even himself. A vast stillness opened, like a sky without horizon. Awareness remained, but the one who was aware dissolved. He understood then. The cycle ends not when you become something greater, but when you stop being anything at all. The dawn after the end. The next morning, Arun opened his eyes. The sun was rising, but it felt like the first sunrise ever witnessed. The stranger was gone, but he had left behind a single line carved into the stone step. Freedom is not escape. Freedom is the end of the one who believed he was trapped. Arun bowed his head, not in worship, but in recognition. The cycle had lost its captive. He walked down the mountain, not as a seeker, not as a self, not as a soul returning to anything, but as pure presence living through the form called Arun for as long as the body lasted. Birth would no longer bind him. Death would no longer claim him. The will had stopped, not because he escaped it, but because he no longer turned with it. He was free. After the wheel stopped turning. The life of Arun after awakening. The village below the mountain did not notice when Arun returned. No halo followed him, no visible radiance, no mystical signs. He walked quietly, stepping over the worn earth path, as though he were moving through a dream he no longer took to be real. And yet, though nothing about him seemed extraordinary, everything had changed. He saw the world now as a play of light on water, beautiful, temporary, and fundamentally insubstantial. He no longer felt like a character in the story, but like the open space in which the story appeared. This was not indifference. It was intimacy of a different kind, an intimacy without possession, without fear. 1. The first day back among people. Arun's mother was the first to greet him. She cried when she saw him. "My son, where have you been?" she asked, pressing his hands in hers. Arun felt affection, but it no longer originated from a personal identity. It flowed naturally, like a breeze through an open window. "Here," he said simply. She looked confused. "Do you mean the shrine? The forest? The mountains? I mean here, in this moment. I never left." She laughed, thinking it was a joke. Arun did not correct her. He no longer needed to be understood. 2. The awakening in ordinary moments. That evening, Arun went to the riverbanks to wash. The water was cold, and the current tugged gently at his hands. He noticed something profound. Nothing in the world resisted its own nature anymore. The river flowed, the wind blew, the mind thought, the body breathed, and he, whatever he was, did not interfere. Before the awakening, he had felt like a man trying to swim against a current. Now, it was as if he had become the river itself. When hunger came, he ate. When fatigue rose, he slept. When pain appeared, he allowed it. When joy flickered, he did not chase it. Life became a spontaneous movement without a self trying to manage it. 3. People noticed without knowing why. The villagers sensed something different. Children were drawn to him. They sat near him as he worked in the fields, as though his presence was as comforting as shade in summer. Elders came to him with quiet questions. My mind won't stop worrying. I fear death. I have lived so long and I still don't know who I am. Arun never gave them doctrine or philosophy. Instead, he listened fully, so fully that the one speaking felt, perhaps for the first time, that their voice was the only sound in the universe. Sometimes he responded, sometimes he said nothing at all. But people always left him lighter, quieter, more whole. He became known as the one who hears without judgment. 4. The strange piece of pain. One winter morning, Arun fell on a patch of frozen ground and injured his arm. The bone cracked sharply. His body cried out in pain. But the pain did not disturb him. He watched it arise and move through the body like a storm front. There was deep compassion for the body, this fragile vessel that had served him for so many lifetimes, but there was no suffering. The villagers rushed to help him. You must rest, they insisted. Arun smiled. The body will rest when it must. He did not identify as the injured one. The body hurt. The awareness did not. 5. He lived without accumulating anything. Arun no longer saw possessions as his. He kept only what was necessary: a blanket for cold nights, a bowl for meals, a knife for work. If someone needed any of these things, he gave them away without hesitation. One day a young man asked, "Why don't you protect what you own?" Arun replied, "Nothing here belongs to anyone. Things pass through hands the way seasons pass through the earth." The young man frowned. "But what if someone steals from you?" Arun answered, "Then the thing has simply gone where it needed to go." 6. The quiet power of non-fear. One night, a local drunk approached Arun with anger, shouting insults and attempting to push him. The villagers gasped, expecting a fight. Arun did not move. He stood as still as a mountain. The drunk's rage weakened. His arms dropped. He sank to the ground and began to cry. Arun sat beside him without a word. Later, someone asked, "Weren't you afraid he would harm you?" Arun simply said, "I have already died many times, and the one who could be harmed is not here anymore." 7. Old karma faded like smoke. Though he was liberated from the cycle, old karmic echoes still played out in the body-mind, habits, tendencies, fragments from past lives. But nothing stuck. A thought would rise. You should be more disciplined. And dissolve. An old fear would appear. What if you fail? And vanish. A memory would surface. I was wronged once. And disintegrate without leaving a residue. Karma had lost its fuel because the self that once fed it was gone. 8. The final understanding. Years passed and the village changed. Children grew, elders died, houses were rebuilt. Arun moved through these shifts like a peaceful witness. One evening, as he watched the sunset paint the fields gold, a realization came, not as thought but as a silent warmth in the heart. He had not achieved liberation. He had simply become what he had always been. The cycle of rebirth had never truly imprisoned him. It was a dream, long and convincing. But now he was awake. The body would someday fall. But he would not return, not because he escaped, but because there was no longer anyone to be reborn. He lived not as a liberated man, but as liberation itself, wearing the costume of a man. 9. His final days. When his body finally began to weaken with age, people gathered around him. Master Arun, they called him, though he had never accepted the title. One asked, "Are you afraid of dying?" Arun smiled gently, looking at the sky. "How can I fear something that has ended for me already? The body returns to dust. But what I am does not come or go." His last words were simple. Do not look for freedom in the future. See that you are free now. Then he closed his eyes. The breath left the body like a sigh of relief. But something vast, silent, and eternal remained, untouched by death, untouched by time. It had always been here. It would always be here. The villagers mourned the man. But Arun was not the man. He was the clear, open sky that had been shining through him all along.